Hello, and this is King here with another Raid Shadow Legends video, and today I wanted to do a rundown of masteries. But masteries are very interchangeable, a lot of different options, so this video is going to be more specific about masteries for Demon Lord Clan Boss. When you start talking Hydra, Dungeons, Arena, Faction Wars, it all changes, specific on the champion and the team you're using. So today I'm going to focus on Demon Lord Clan Boss, and I'm going to try and run through every single mastery, whether it's good, bad, how it can be used, and if it can be used, but what's better, etc, etc. So we'll start off with the offensive tree. So of course you've got the first two in Blade Disciple and Deadly Precision. Now you hear a lot of people say if you got the critical rate, don't worry, go on Deadly Precision, get the extra attack. However, in this game we change gear a lot. Like, you might build a champion and you need the gear somewhere else, or you might upgrade their gear and all of that sort of stuff. And I don't think it's worth going Blade Disciple ever to get the plus 75 attack, unless your champion doesn't need critical rate. But getting the critical rate just means that for future builds you'll always have that extra 5%. So it's a much highly more recommended than the attack, and of course attack only works for attack based champions, and then again it is only plus 75. It's not that much. So I would 100% go with the critical rate, even if you've already got 100% critical rate, and then for future builds you've always got that extra 5% if you need it. Then you've got Heart of Glory, which increases damage inflicted by 5% when attacking with full HP. You've got Keen Strike, which increases critical damage by 10%. You've got Shield Breaker, which increases damage inflicted to targets under shield buffs by 25%. And you've got Grim Resolve, which increases damage inflicted by 5% when attacking with 50% HP or less. So this one's a much easier tree. So basically for Clan Boss, Shield Breaker is deleted. You're never going to want to use it, and it's a pointless thing to pick up. Now as for the Keen Strike, this is a really good option on every champion that doesn't bring ally protection. Because obviously if the higher critical damage an ally protection champion has, the more damage they will take. So really good for any sort of DPS, support DPS, but not for an ally protection champion. And in terms of Heart of Glory and Grim Resolve, it'll depend on the team you're running. If you're running a block damage team or a counter attack or survivability team, you're much more likely to go Heart of Glory, because you're going to be more often than not attacking with full HP. If you're going for an unkillable team, where you constantly have that low HP, then naturally Grim Resolve is your better option. Now that's not to say that these here are mandatory. Those two, it's a 5% increase in damage, but it's not a necessity in Clan Boss. You might want to pick up something in the defense or support tree other than those. And then going into the third line, we've got Single Out, increases damage inflicted to targets with less than 40% HP by 8%. We've got Life Drinker, heals by 5% of damage inflicted when attacking with 50% HP or less. Then we've got Whirlwind of Death, increases speed by 6 for each enemy killed by this champion. And finally, Ruthless Ambush, increases damage inflicted by 8% on the first hit on each enemy. So for Clan Boss, naturally you're going to delete Whirlwind of Death and Ruthless Ambush. They are not going to be at all beneficial for Clan Boss, because your fights go for so long and you're not killing enemies. So those two are gone. Now as for Life Drinker, it's only really a necessity if you need those heals. It's sort of a bonus, a little bonus at that. It's very old school buff, can be really good on some team compositions, but generally recommended trying to find a mastery in a different tree. And then as for Single Out, it is a fantastic mastery. Increases damage to targets of less than 40% HP by 8%. So you're getting a nice 8% damage buff when the Clan Boss has 40% less HP, which is really good on when you get down to the Affinity standard, because it switches over to Affinity at 50%, then a little bit more, and then this here will come into play. So I highly recommend it, Single Out, 100%. Then we've got Bring It Down, increases damage by 6% when attacking targets with higher max HP. Wrath of the Slain, increases damage by 5% for each dead ally. Then we've got Cycle of Violence, has a 30% chance of decreasing the cooldown of a random skill by 1 turn if the damage inflicted by a skill exceeds 30% of the target's max HP. Occurs once per turn. And then lastly, Opportunist. Increases damage to targets with those CC debuffs. So Opportunist, not necessary and completely pointless with the clan boss because you can't put those CCs on them. Then you've got Cycle of Violence. Now it's pointless for a clan boss. It's not negative because you're not going to get a decreased skill cooldown because you're not going to be dealing that much damage against the clan boss in a single skill. However, you'll see a few of my champions actually have this mastery that I use for clan boss, and that's simply because of things like faction wars and other areas where I might use that champion, because it's not a negative to have it, it's not a risk, but it also brings no benefit against the clan boss. Then you've got Wrath of the Slain, exactly the same story as the Cycle of Violence, where it's not going to help you for the clan boss. You might get, when everybody's dying, you might get an extra 10% on one of your hits. No big, it's pointless for clan boss, but it can also be useful in other areas. And then of course you've got Bring It Down, and clan boss will always have higher HP than your champions, so definitely pick it up. 60% increase in damage, hell yeah, we'll take that, thank you very much. Another highly recommended, almost a mandatory buff, mastery you could say, along with Single Out. And then you come down to the second last line. We've got Methodical. Increases the damage inflicted by this champion's default skill by 2%. Increases up to a maximum of 10%. Then we've got Kill Streak. Increases damage by 6%, 3%, depending on the location, on enemies killed. Then we've got Blood Shield. Places a shield buff on this champion when they kill an enemy target. And Stoked to Fury. Increases damage by 4% for each debuff on this champion. So, this one here also becomes quite versatile. So naturally the first one, Methodical, is absolutely amazing to pick up. You can really get some very nice damage because you will use a lot of default skills, a lot of basic skills in a long clan boss fight. So I highly recommend it. Even if you're going out later on for Giant Slayer, I still highly recommend picking up Methodical. As for Kill Streak, again, completely useless in clan boss, but also it's not going to bring anything negative. The Blood Shield, very solid buff, but nothing useful for clan boss. Really good for something like in faction wars, so it's a good one to pick up if you're going towards Giant Slayer or one of these other ones. And then Stoked to Fury, I've actually used this before on a team that done some self debuffs, and of course the clan boss also brings in that poison. So it didn't really bring much extra damage. 12% is nice, but you don't really want to keep those debuffs on you and all that sort of stuff. So you can pick it up. It's a nice little extra. You can get an extra 4% when the clan boss lays up poison on you or something like that. Again, it's not anything negative. It's just if you're taking debuffs, you can put it on there, but the tree to get all the way to that side is completely useless. So it's a mastery that you'll never really see used or should ever see used, because you don't want to go down that tree. Now as for the last line, I'll single out these two masteries first. You've got Helm Smasher and Flawless Execution. Basically, you don't ever really want to pick up these two. You might say, hey, what if I have an Acrizia? Doesn't that extra critical damage on Flawless Execution mean amazing work? Or even that ignore defense chance? Hell yeah. Well, no, not really. So the ignore defense doesn't really take into effect so much because the clan boss does have a pretty low defense, so you put a decreased defense debuff, or you put cruelty or both of those on there, and you're going to be ignoring more defense than you ever need to. And then as for Flawless Execution, extra critical damage, even on a max HP hit like an Acrizia or something like that, where she does it on each hit, you're not going to get a very small return compared to a War Master or Giant Slayer. Now, this is always the big question. Do I choose War Master? Do I choose Giant Slayer? Well, let's quickly go over them. So, War Master has a 60% chance of inflicting bonus damage when attacking. Bonus damage is equal to 10% of the target champion's max HP or 4% of the target's max HP when attacking bosses. Bonus damage can only occur once per skill and does not count as an extra hit. And then Giant Slayer is very similar, but it's a lower percentage. 3% of the target's max HP when attacking bosses, but it goes off every hit, but it also does not count as an extra hit. So, if you have a champion that does a double hitter on the A1 and then a triple hitter on the A2 and A3, you still want to pick up Giant Slayer. If they do a double hit on the A1 and single hits on their other abilities, you're better off with the War Master. And then if they're doing triple hit or more on the A1, then of course Giant Slayer again. Why? Simply because if you just look at it at simple maths, we have a 60% chance with the War Master and a 30% chance with the Giant Slayer. So if you're hitting only once with the A1, you're always going to want to go with the War Master because it does deal a tiny bit more damage. If you're doing a double hit, it pretty much evens out, but it still does go towards War Master if you get a little bit lucky. But when you start getting extra hits, like 3 or more, Giant Slayer absolutely smashes War Master. So that's the general rule of thumb. If they do 1 or 2 with the A1 and 1 or 2 with the other abilities, go for War Master. If they start doing 3s and that sort of stuff, Giant Slayer. Now the thing with Giant Slayer, because it is off the tree a little bit, you do have to pick up one of these masteries which will not help you out in Clan Boss, but for Giant Slayer it is highly worth it and a really good mastery to pick up. So that is the offensive tree. As you can see with my Sepulchre Sentinel, with the build I think she was in, it was more of a general support with a bit of damage. So in general, with Clan Boss, you always want to come down and finish at either War Master or Giant Slayer. The damage you get from champions in Clan Boss with these abilities outweighs any other masteries in the other trees. Unlike, for example, with the Hydra Clan Boss, where I have a lot of champions that don't even go down the offensive tree. You might say, hey, but you might get a few more extra damage. Very true, but against like Hydra or something like that, those extra support masteries actually bring a lot more turns and allows your DPS champions to bring a lot more damage. So again, we're talking about Clan Boss Demon Lord here, so I'll sort of put that to the side and just stick with Clan Boss Demon Lord. You really want to pick up War Master or Giant Slayer depending on the champion it is going with. Sepulchre Sentinel has an A1 on her A1, so she's going with War Master. Nice, simple and easy. And she can do a decent damage just from the Masteries buff. Then of course I picked a Life Drinker on her as well as Heart of Glory. That's because she's generally at full HP for the team that I ran her in, but having that Life Drinker, because I didn't need the Mastery anywhere else, was just a nice little buff and bonus. So that's all for the offensive tree video, and now I'll post a link to the next one, which will be the defensive tree, and I'll see you all there. Cheers.